Don't you dare ask us to cancel our plans again, my mother snapped through the video call. We've had these Elton John tickets for months. Her voice echoed around the sterile hospital room, bouncing off the cold walls like a slap. I sat there, stunned, clutching my phone with trembling hands. It was Christmas Eve. Las Vegas Medical Center was nearly silent, except for the occasional beeping of monitors and the soft sounds of my 2-year-old twins, Ethan and Emily, playing in the corner with their worn-out stuffed animals. A nurse named Valerie was checking my vitals, her presence calm but filled with concern. The pain in my abdomen was unbearable, like someone was twisting a knife inside me. But somehow, the pain of hearing my mother's indifference was worse. It always was. My name is Natasha Wilson. I'm 33 years old. And for as long as I can remember, I've been an afterthought in my own family. I tried to steady my breathing as I listened to them, my parents, go on and on about how unfair it was to expect them to change their Christmas plans, about how they'd been looking forward to the concert for months, and how I was always needing something. Meanwhile, I was lying there, with internal bleeding from complications tied to my late husband's death 6 months earlier. The doctors had said I needed emergency surgery, immediate surgery. Otherwise, there was a real chance I wouldn't make it through the night. And still, the only thing my parents cared about was a concert and a party with my younger sister, Jessica. When I finally managed to whisper, "Please, I have no one else," my dad's voice cut through with even more cruelty than I'd braced for. "You're becoming a real burden, Natasha. We're retired now. We deserve to enjoy our lives without constant problems." I felt the words sink deep, heavier than any IV line or medical chart in the room. For 3 years, I'd been sending them $2,500 every month to help cover their mortgage and expenses. Even after James died, even while drowning in grief, I'd kept helping them. Believing that was what family was supposed to do. Believing that maybe, just maybe, if I loved them enough, they'd finally love me back. How foolish I was. A tear slipped down my cheek, and I quickly wiped it away, embarrassed, even though Valerie pretended not to notice. She adjusted my blankets with gentle hands, like she knew that tonight was about more than just physical pain. She leaned in close and said softly, "My friend Olivia's a professional nanny, specializes in trauma care for young kids. If you want, I can call her for you." Her kindness was so simple, and it shattered something in me, because it made the contrast so painfully clear. A stranger cared more about my children's well-being than my own parents did. I glanced over at Ethan and Emily, my sweet babies, too young to understand what was happening. They'd already lost their father. And now, if things went badly tonight, they might lose me too. The thought paralyzed me with fear. But another thought, a sharper, stronger one, broke through the fog. I couldn't leave them with people who saw them as burdens, who saw me as a burden. I gritted my teeth against another wave of pain and nodded at Valerie. "Yes, please. Call her." With those words, I didn't just agree to get help for the night. I made a decision, a real one, a permanent one. I was done begging for scraps of love and decency from people who never really cared. As Valerie stepped out to make the call, I sat back against the hospital bed, letting the memories crash over me. All those times growing up, when Jessica was the shining star and I was just the background noise. When I graduated with honors and got a half-hearted pat on the back because Jessica had booked a commercial that same weekend. When I got married and they complained the venue was too far. When my twins were born and they visited once, only to leave after an hour because the babies were too fussy. I had spent a lifetime trying to earn their love. And now, facing my own mortality, I realized they never saw me. Not really. And I deserved better. I pressed my hand over my abdomen, feeling the agony ripple through me. But there was a strange kind of peace growing underneath it. It was small. It was shaky. But it was there. Valerie returned a few minutes later, her smile reassuring. Olivia's on her way. She'll be here soon. For the first time that night, I let out a shaky breath I hadn't even realized I'd been holding. And as I stared at the tiny, brave faces of my children across the room, I promised myself, whatever happened next, we were going to be okay. Even if it meant walking away from the people who should have loved us most. It's funny how, when everything falls apart, you start to see the whole picture. The way it always was. As I laid there in that hospital bed, waiting for surgery, my mind kept drifting, not just to the pain in my body, but to the pain that had been there for so much longer. The kind you learn to live with so well that you almost forget it's not supposed to be there at all. Growing up, I was never the favorite. Jessica, my younger sister, she was the golden child. She was the one who could do no wrong. She'd score a B on a test, and it was celebrated like she cured cancer. I got straight A's, graduated college with honors, and it barely earned a nod. Maybe a polite clap at dinner if they remembered. Every milestone in my life was treated like an afterthought. A minor inconvenience compared to whatever Jessica had going on. When I married James, the love of my life, my parents complained that the wedding venue was too far from their house. They almost didn't come at all. And when Ethan and Emily were born, their only grandchildren, they visited once. Stayed for maybe an hour. Said the babies were too fussy and overwhelming. I remember standing at the door after they left, rocking my newborns in my arms, wondering why it always seemed so easy for them to walk away from me. James was the first person who ever made me feel like I was enough, just as I was. He understood what it felt like to be on the outside looking in. His own family had cut him off years before we met, and I think that's part of why we bonded so deeply. We promised each other that we would build a family rooted in love, not obligation, and for a while, we did. We filled our little home with laughter, bedtime stories, messy art projects, and pancake breakfasts that sometimes turned into pancake disasters. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. It was real. And then, one rainy night, a drunk driver changed everything. 6 months ago, James was taken from us in an instant. One minute he was heading home from work, bringing pizza for Friday movie night. And the next, I was standing in a hospital hallway, clutching a police officer's hand, like it was the only thing keeping me upright, while he told me my husband was gone. Losing James was like having the ground ripped out from under me. I didn't know how to breathe, how to eat, how to be without him. But somehow, even through the grief, I kept going. Because I had Ethan and Emily. They needed me to keep breathing, and because I thought that's what James would have wanted. Even then, even drowning in my own pain, I kept sending money to my parents. $2,500 every month, like clockwork. I told myself it was the right thing to do. I told myself that maybe, if I kept being the good daughter, they would finally see me, finally care. But sitting there in that hospital room, hearing their voices so cold and dismissive through the phone, something cracked open inside me. It wasn't just tonight. It had never been just tonight. It was every birthday they forgot. Every milestone they brushed aside. Every time they made it clear that Jessica's happiness mattered more than my existence. I spent my whole life trying to earn something that was never going to be given freely. And in doing that, I lost myself. I lost the parts of me that should have been celebrated. I quieted my own voice, made myself smaller, easier to overlook, hoping that if I just stayed good and helpful and silent enough, maybe one day they would choose me too. But they never did. And now, lying there, facing the very real possibility that I might not make it through the night, I realized I wasn't just fighting to survive the surgery. I was fighting to survive a lifetime of being invisible, and for the first time, I wasn't willing to disappear anymore. I deserved better. Ethan and Emily deserved better. James would have wanted better for us. I looked over at my babies, their little heads bent together, building towers out of plastic hospital cups, completely unaware of the storm swirling around them. And right then, I made myself a second promise. I wasn't just going to survive this surgery, I was going to survive my parents too. And I was going to build a life for my children where they would never, ever have to question if they were loved. No matter what it took. The decision wasn't easy. Even after everything, even after the hurt and the rejection, my fingers still trembled as I reached for my phone. Valerie had just left to meet Olivia at the hospital entrance, and for a moment it was just me, the twins, and the low hum of machines surrounding us. I pulled up my banking app. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might shake the bed. For years I'd told myself that supporting my parents was love, that it was duty, that it was what good daughters do. But sitting here now, at the edge of life and death, I finally saw the truth. Love doesn't demand that you bleed yourself dry to earn scraps of affection. With one swipe, I canceled the automatic transfers. $2,500 a month. Gone. Then, before I could second-guess myself, I typed out a message to my parents. Short, final. I will no longer be providing financial support. My children and I deserve better than being your afterthoughts. Do not contact me again. I stared at the screen for a long second before hitting send. And just like that, a weight I didn't even realize I'd been carrying started to lift. Almost immediately after, there was a soft knock at the door. Valerie peeked in, and behind her stood a woman with a kind smile, holding a small bag over her shoulder. "Natasha, this is Olivia." Olivia stepped in, crouching down instantly to the twins' level, smiling wide and open like she had all the time in the world just for them. I watched, barely breathing, as Ethan shyly offered her his favorite toy truck. And when Emily toddled over, reaching for Olivia's hand without hesitation, I felt something crack open inside me again. Only this time, it wasn't pain, it was hope. Valerie gave me a reassuring nod as the doctors came in to prep me for surgery. And as they wheeled me down the hall, I caught one last glimpse of Olivia sitting cross-legged on the floor, laughing softly as she played with my children. For the first time all day, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. The surgery was a blur. Hours lost to anesthesia and fear and pain. But when I finally woke up, groggy and sore and weaker than I had ever felt before, I was still here. Alive. Barely, but alive. Olivia was there too, sitting quietly in a chair by the bed, watching over Ethan and Emily as they napped on a pile of hospital blankets. When she noticed I was awake, she smiled, that same warm, steady smile, and quietly said, "They're okay. You're okay." I tried to thank her, but my throat was too dry to speak. Instead, I just nodded, tears slipping from the corners of my eyes. Later that evening, when Valerie brought me my phone, I saw it lighting up nonstop. 27 missed calls, a flood of angry, frantic text messages, all from my parents. None asking if I survived, none asking about the twins, just furious demands about the canceled payment, threats, guilt trips, accusations that I was destroying the family and punishing them unfairly. I set the phone down. I didn't even have the energy to read them all. And honestly, I didn't want to. I was about to close my eyes when another notification popped up. This one from Jessica. Her message was different. "Mom and Dad just called me freaking out. They said you're being dramatic about some surgery. What's going on? Are you okay?" I hesitated for a moment. Jessica and I had never been close, but somehow I could hear real worry in her words. So, I told her. I told her everything. The emergency surgery, the danger, the way our parents chose concert tickets over their own grandchildren, the truth that they'd hidden from her. I half expected silence, or excuses. But almost immediately, Jessica wrote back, "Oh my God, Natasha. I had no idea. They told me it was just some routine thing. If I had known, I would have come. I would have helped. I'm so sorry. I really am." And for the first time in what felt like forever, I believed her. Jessica wasn't cruel. She was just as caught in their web as I had been, raised to believe that her comfort, her plans, her feelings mattered most. And mine were always just background noise. Maybe now she was starting to see the cracks too. I lay back against the pillows, exhausted but strangely lighter inside. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. But it was something. A first breath of freedom. A first glimpse of a life where I didn't have to keep sacrificing myself for people who only ever took. And even though my body ached and my future felt uncertain, for the first time in a long time, I knew one thing for sure. I was done being invisible. I was done being a burden. I was done being anything less than enough. Recovery was slow. Every small movement felt like climbing a mountain, and some days, just sitting up in bed felt like a victory. But even with the pain and the exhaustion, I felt different now. Stronger. Clearer. And I knew. I had crossed a line I wasn't willing to step back over, which made it almost laughable when, just a few days after being discharged, my parents showed up at my apartment like nothing had happened. I spotted them through the peephole, my mom, adjusting her designer purse on her shoulder, my dad standing stiff with his arms crossed like he was gearing up for a battle. For a second, a part of me, the old part, the part that still wanted to please them, considered pretending I wasn't home. But then I thought of Ethan and Emily sleeping soundly in the next room, safe, loved, protected, and I knew it was time to face this. I opened the door just a few inches, enough to make it clear I wasn't inviting them in. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. My mother's smile was tight, too sweet to be real. "We were worried," she said, clutching her purse tighter. "You haven't been answering our calls." I stared at her, at both of them, waiting for the words that never came. Not, "How are you?" Not, "How are the twins?" Just, money. My dad was less subtle. "We need to discuss this financial situation," he said, stepping forward as if he could just bulldoze his way back into my life. "There's nothing to discuss," I said. "I told you, I'm done." My mom's face crumpled into a look of disbelief, the same fake hurt she used when things didn't go her way. "Sweetheart, we've come to depend on that money. We made decisions based on your commitment to help us." I shook my head, a sad, tired smile pulling at the corners of my mouth. My commitment was out of love, not obligation, and definitely not endless sacrifice. My father's face hardened, the way it always did when he realized I wasn't going to bend. "You owe us. After everything we've done for you." I felt the anger rise, but I swallowed it back. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to defend myself anymore. "You made your choices," I said, calm and steady. "And now I'm making mine." Without another word, I closed the door. I leaned against it for a long moment, listening to the muffled sounds of them arguing outside before their voices finally faded down the hallway. Of course, they didn't stop there. They sent an email, a group email, to the entire extended family. It was filled with dramatic accusations that I had abandoned them, that I had selfishly cut them off after everything they sacrificed for me. They made sure to leave out the part about refusing to help me during emergency surgery. They painted themselves as victims, and me as the ungrateful daughter who'd thrown them away. At first, I panicked. The guilt rose up so fast it made my stomach twist. But then, something incredible happened. One by one, my cousins started replying. Michael, who lived near my parents, wrote back bluntly. Didn't Uncle Robert just buy a new boat last summer? And didn't Aunt Diana show off a new diamond bracelet at Thanksgiving? Others chimed in too, questioning the story, asking for more details. Privately, a few messaged me directly, offering support, asking if I needed anything. It turned out, the truth speaks for itself when you finally let it. Meanwhile, in my own, tiny corner of the world, something even more important was happening. I was building a life. A real one. Olivia became more than just a nanny. She became a friend, a partner in this strange, messy new chapter. Jessica started visiting more, tentatively at first, but slowly opening up, asking questions about the twins, bringing groceries, cooking dinners. It wasn't perfect, and I knew I had to be careful. But, for the first time, there was a crack of light between us, a real possibility. And then there was the support group Valerie told me about, for young widowed parents. I joined my first meeting from my living room, still wrapped in a blanket, the twins playing in the background. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. Hearing other people talk about their losses, their struggles, their small victories, it didn't erase the pain, but it made it feel survivable. It made me feel seen. It made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't broken beyond repair. Looking back, I can see now that surviving wasn't just about getting through the surgery. It was about getting through the years of feeling like I was never enough. It was about learning that love isn't measured by how much you're willing to lose yourself for someone else. It's measured by how much you're willing to fight for yourself too. And even though I was still tired, still scared sometimes, I wasn't surviving anymore. I was rebuilding. One boundary, one truth, one small, brave step at a time. It's amazing how much your life can change once you stop carrying the weight that was never yours to bear. Over the next few months, something inside me kept growing, slowly at first, like a seed breaking through the soil after a long, hard winter. I started putting more energy into my work. Not just the graphic design jobs I had always done, but a new idea, something that actually meant something to me. After James died, I had made a small memorial website for him. Just something simple, something to help me process the grief. When I mentioned it during a support group meeting, a few people asked if I could help them create ones for their loved ones too. At first I said yes, just to be helpful. But before long, it turned into something real. A small business, built out of love and loss, one story at a time. It wasn't making me rich by any stretch, but for the first time in a long time, my work felt meaningful. It felt good, and with the money I was no longer sending to my parents every month, I started daring to think even bigger. A few months after my surgery, I found a little 3-bedroom house on the edge of a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't anything fancy, an older place with creaky floors and a kitchen that needed updating, but it had something my tiny apartment never could. A backyard. A real backyard, with space for Ethan and Emily to run and play and just be kids. The day we moved in, Olivia brought over cupcakes shaped like little houses, and Jessica showed up with a big bag of groceries and a wide, hopeful smile. It wasn't the life I had once imagined for myself, but in a lot of ways, it was even better, because it was ours, built from the ground up, on my terms. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, my parents' world was crumbling. Without my financial support, the cracks they had spent years papering over with fancy vacations and expensive toys started to widen. They tried to hold on to the image at first, keeping the boat, pretending everything was fine. But one by one, the luxuries had to go. First the boat, then the timeshare. The vacations stopped. The new cars disappeared. The lavish dinners and spa weekends, gone. I heard bits and pieces through Jessica, who was still in limited contact with them. She told me how they had maxed out credit cards, taken a second mortgage, borrowed money from anyone who would listen. And finally, when there was no one else left to ask, they came back to me. This time it wasn't subtle. They showed up on my doorstep with a spreadsheet, a literal spreadsheet, outlining exactly how much they needed to save the family home. $144,000. I stood there, holding Ethan in one arm and balancing Emily on my hip, listening as they laid out their demands like it was some sort of business transaction. "We can't make the payments without your help," my father said, the old hardness in his voice replaced with a kind of desperation I had never seen before. "You'll let your parents lose everything?" my mother asked, tears welling up in her eyes. For a moment, I felt it. That old pull of guilt, that whisper in the back of my mind that said, "You owe them. You can fix this." But then I looked at my children, my whole world, and I realized something. I don't owe anyone my peace. Especially not the people who couldn't even be bothered to watch their grandchildren while I was fighting for my life. I shifted Ethan higher on my hip and said simply, "I'm sorry you're struggling, but I can't help you." They pleaded. They guilted. They accused. But I stood firm, because saving them would mean sacrificing the life I had just started building. It would mean going right back to being the person who put everyone else's needs ahead of her own. And I was done being that person. As they left, I closed the door behind them, gently, but with finality. And for the first time, I didn't feel crushed by their disappointment. I didn't feel like a bad daughter. I felt free. Because choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. And after everything, I was finally learning how to live. Time has a way of softening the edges of even the deepest wounds. But it doesn't erase them. It doesn't let you forget. Almost a year after my surgery, after cutting ties, after rebuilding a life from the ground up, something unexpected showed up in my mailbox. It was a letter. Not a text, not an email. An actual handwritten letter. The familiar handwriting on the envelope made my stomach twist, old reflexes kicking in before I even opened it. For a long minute, I just stood there, holding it in my hand. Part of me wanted to throw it away unopened. Part of me didn't want to give them another chance to hurt me. But curiosity, and maybe just a sliver of something else, something softer, won out. I sat down at the kitchen table, took a deep breath, and unfolded the paper. It was from my mother. And it wasn't what I expected. It wasn't manipulative. It wasn't angry or demanding. It was an apology, a real one. She wrote about how, after losing my financial support and facing the fallout of their choices, she and my father had started attending therapy. First separately, then together. She admitted to things I never thought she would even acknowledge. The jealousy she had felt watching me build a life without needing her. The resentment she had harbored because I didn't fit the mold of the daughter she wanted. The way they had minimized my pain, ignored my needs, and put their own comfort first. Over and over again. "Watching you rebuild your life without us," she wrote, "forced me to see truths I spent years trying to deny." She didn't ask for money. She didn't even ask for forgiveness. She just asked that I read the letter and know. She was trying to change. At first, I didn't know what to do with it. Jessica, who had slowly become a real part of my life again, warned me to be careful. "They've been talking about writing you for months," she said. But Dad wasn't on board at first. It's only after he had a health scare, chest pains, high blood pressure, that he started realizing they couldn't outrun the damage they caused. Hearing that didn't make it any easier. I wasn't sure if this was genuine growth or just a new way to pull me back in. I spent days thinking about it, letting it sit there in the back of my mind while I went about my life, playing with the twins in the backyard, baking cookies with Jessica on a lazy Sunday, attending support group meetings where I could be honest without fear of judgment. And little by little, I realized I didn't owe them forgiveness. But I also didn't have to carry the bitterness forever either. So, I agreed to meet them. At a neutral place, a quiet little cafe, not far from my new home. The day of the meeting, I was nervous. Not the shaky, desperate kind of nervous I used to feel around them. This was different. This was the nerves of someone who knows her worth and refuses to let anyone take it away again. When they walked in, I almost didn't recognize them. My father, who had always carried himself like he ruled every room, seemed smaller somehow, humbled. My mother wasn't dressed in designer clothes like she usually was. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, her face lined not just by time, but by something deeper. Regret, maybe. We sat down, and for a moment, no one spoke. Then my father did something I had never seen in all my life. He cried. Right there, in the middle of a crowded cafe, he broke down. "I've been a terrible father," he said, his voice shaking, "and an even worse grandfather. I don't expect you to forgive us, but I need you to know. I see it now. I see everything we lost." My mother reached across the table, not touching me, but holding her hand out, trembling. "We've been going to therapy," she said. "It was Jessica's idea. We fought it at first, but it's changed us." I listened, not because I was ready to forget or even fully believe, but because I was strong enough now to hear them without needing anything from them in return. When they asked tentatively if they could someday know Ethan and Emily, I didn't say yes, and I didn't say no. I laid out my terms, clearly, calmly. If you want to be a part of their lives, you will respect me. You will show up when you say you will. You will never, ever make them feel the way you made me feel. And if you ever hurt them, that door will close permanently. They nodded, both of them looking like they understood that this time, there would be no second chances. Walking away from that cafe, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not fear, not guilt, not sadness, just peace. Because I wasn't that desperate little girl anymore, begging for scraps of love. I was a woman who knew exactly what she deserved. And for the first time, I knew how to protect it. Whatever happened next, I wasn't living for their approval anymore. I was living for me, and for Ethan, and for Emily. And that was more than enough. It's never easy to walk away from people you love, even when they've hurt you more times than you can count. There's a part of you that still hopes, still waits, still wants things to be different. But at some point, you have to choose peace over patterns. You have to choose yourself. For me, protecting my children and protecting myself meant finally loving myself enough to say, no more. No more guilt. No more silent suffering. No more shrinking, just to keep the peace. And that choice, as terrifying as it was, gave me back my life. If you've ever had to make a hard decision like that, if you've ever walked away to save yourself, I just want you to know. I see you. And if you feel like sharing your story, I'd love to hear it in the comments. Your voice matters, more than you know. And if this story touched you, helped you feel a little less alone, or just made you think, feel free to like and subscribe. It helps me keep sharing these moments with you. Thanks for listening. Truly.